Welcome, everybody who made it through the Zoom obstacle course. Welcome to a talk with Sister District Project, Mass, Rhode Island, and Professor Alan Lightman on finding stillness in a time of activism. Professor Lightman, who has insisted we call him Alan, is generously donating his time to support our Florida House candidates who are here, Ricky Junquera and Franccesca Cesti-Browne. As a special bonus, Sister District Project co-founder Lala Wu will also say a few words. She's a big fan of Alan's book, Einstein's Dreams, so she couldn't resist. I'm Juliet, a volunteer and member of the Mass Rhode Island Steering Committee, and I'll be moderating tonight from my bathroom, which now that we all live on Zoom is the only private spot in the house. Thank you all for being here. A word about process. I have a list of questions you've submitted for Alan. You may also submit questions at any time by typing them in the Zoom chat section. Please remember to keep yourself on mute. And if you'd like to applaud at any point, feel free to do the Zoom clap. Finally, we will be recording and sharing this event. For those of you unfamiliar with Sister District Project, we are a national grassroots organization of almost 45,000 volunteers working to flip state legislatures from red to blue. Our Mass Rhode Island chapter has done a fantastic job getting candidates into office through postcarding, phone banking, texting, fundraising, canvassing pre-pandemic, a music series, our next gig is August 9th, and creative projects such as this evening's talk. Among other successes last year, we helped flip the Virginia legislature, and we supported a winning candidate in the Deep South for the Mississippi House of Representatives. So why do we care so much about state races? We've gotten this question a lot this year in particular. Supporting state races in a presidential election year may seem irrelevant, but in fact, the so-called trickle-up theory has shown that voters who vote for candidates at the bottom of the ticket are more likely to vote for those at the top as well. In other words, by getting out the vote for down ballot races, we end up supporting top ticket candidates. Another reason states matter, redistricting is coming up after this election. In Florida, the state legislature draws district lines. The Florida House is particularly gerrymandered in favor of Republicans who've controlled the legislature for 21 years. Now is our last chance to get progressives into office so they have a voice in drawing state maps for the next decade. State laws also affect our daily lives in every way possible, especially now. State laws govern most police conduct. State laws enable voter protection or suppression. State laws affect environmental policy, critical in Florida, which has been hard hit by climate change. State laws dictate responses to COVID-19, and we've all seen how that's going in Florida. Thanks to the Republican trifecta in charge, the state is breaking records for new cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. This is why we need more Democrats in state office. State-level campaigns often operate on a shoestring, meaning our contributions have a huge impact. Franccesca and Ricky are both first-time candidates who need to get their name out there and of course can't canvass in person right now. We'll be periodically posting information about donating in the chat section because every dollar counts. And now, please welcome Lala Wu, co-founder and director of engagement and partnerships at Sister District Project. As one of the visionaries behind the group, she'll tell you a bit more about how we work and why supporting Florida is so important this year. Lala.
Thank you so much, Juliet, Caroline, the entire Massachusetts, Rhode Island leadership team for putting together this incredible event tonight. As Juliet mentioned, this is a personally very exciting event for me, as I did read Alan's book when I was in high school, learning how to annotate literature for the first time, and I still have those notes. It's great for me and really exciting to be able to be here tonight. So I just want to start out actually by taking us back, and I'm sorry to do this because it's probably painful, but if you can remember early November 2016, and if you can remember a little bit about how you felt on that day when you realized that Donald Trump was going to be our next president. It was probably a mix of confusion, anger, hurt, all of these feelings, as well as, if you were anything like the co-founders of Sister District, a sense of helplessness. We, at that time, all lived in the Bay Area and looked around and couldn't figure out why it was that in a place with so many resources and energy, we couldn't figure out what it was that we could do to make a difference. We couldn't figure out why it was that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by almost 3 million votes, and that Democrats are the majority of this country. But at that time, we didn't have control of any of the branches of government. We saw a bunch of different reasons. We saw voter suppression, fake news, the Electoral College, but one that really stood out to us was gerrymandering. As Juliet explained, gerrymandering is something that we can control at the state level, which is great. In most states, the state legislature controls redistricting. And this gives us hope, because some of these awful gerrymanders that have been perpetuated by Republicans, for example, in North Carolina, where Trump won by less than 50% of the vote, of the 13 congressional districts there, only 3 are held by Democrats. So that kind of imbalance is not representative, it's not fair, it's not what we want to see in our country. We should have a system where voters choose their politicians, not the other way around. So in 2020, it is our last chance, as Juliet said, for us to get these good state legislatures like Ricky and Franccesca elected so that we can make sure we are prepared to draw fair maps in 2021. This is a once in a decade opportunity, and we cannot mess this up. So thank you so much to everybody for being here. I want to tell you a little bit about how Sister District works for those of you who are new. It is an organization where there are local teams all across the country that are so-called sistered up with state legislative candidates. Then the teams will go on to fundraise, make phone calls, send postcards, text messages, etc. And through this, we've raised in total, since we were founded, over $2.1 million that's gone to our candidates and reached out to over 2.1 million voters. And in no small part due to the incredible work of this team right here in the Mass, Rhode Island area. So really, really incredible work. We've got a lot more work to do. This year, we're supporting 30 candidates in 9 states, and one state I'm incredibly excited about is Florida. We need 14 seats to flip the House, and that may sound like a lot, but it's out of 120. And also, we think of this as an inroad state. It's super critical to build these long-term plans. Virginia in 2017 had a very similar deficit, and then we came back in 2019 and won the whole thing. So we can do this in Florida as well. This is the kind of long game we play here at Sister District, and that Ricky and Franccesca are going to be a part of. So, Florida is a battleground. Obama, of course, won in 2008 and 2012. Trump won it by just about a point in 2016. It's a big 4 state in this country. There are 29 electoral college votes. There are nested congressional districts. There's a lot of potential. There's so much going on here. Momentum is on our side. Andrew Gillum almost won the governorship bid in 2018. He lost by less than half a point. And so we have a lot of potential here. This is a true battleground state. And with Amendment 4 having passed, that enfranchised over 1 million formerly incarcerated people. However, another example how important state legislators are, the Republican-dominated state legislature in Florida has fought tooth and nail to prevent the implementation of Amendment 4. And this has meant that there's mass confusion. There's not going to be the kind, there are people on the ground that are fighting to make sure that every last person who's eligible to vote will be able to vote, but the Republicans in the state legislature have stood in the way. So it is incredibly, incredibly important, the work that Ricky and Franccesca are seeking to do, the work that they have done in their communities. I'm so excited to have them on the call tonight. And it's just incredible. They are such wonderful leaders. They are both in the Miami area where they were raised, where they have deep roots in the community. Could not be more thrilled to see everybody here tonight to support them, to support the work of taking back power in our state legislatures. So I know that you're all here to hear from Alan, so I will step back, but I just want to say thank you again. I feel so much gratitude and hope tonight.
Thank you, Lala, for that rousing call to action. Let me tell you a little bit about Alan before we let him on. The Cambridge Dictionary defines activism as, quote, the use of direct and noticeable action to achieve a result, usually a political or social one. Alan Lightman could not more perfectly, if unconventionally, embody this concept. As a physicist, novelist, essayist, teacher, and spiritual human being, he has for decades opened our minds, challenged our beliefs, and inspired us to ask questions. He was the first person to receive dual faculty appointments in science and the humanities at MIT, where he is currently professor of the practice of the humanities. If I were to list all his awards, fellowships, and honorary doctorates, both for his writing and his contributions to physics, I would be in this bathroom all night. So I will just mention his 2008 gold medal for humanitarian service awarded by the government of Cambodia in honor of a nonprofit he founded, the Harpswell Foundation, whose mission is, quote, to empower a new generation of women leaders in Cambodia and the developing world, specifically through housing, education, and leadership training. Talk about activism. Alan also has the performing arts in his blood. He is the son of a movie theater owner and a dance teacher, after all. And in 2004, he co-founded the Catalyst Collaborative, a partnership between MIT and the Underground Railway Theater of Boston. The goal is to convey science and the culture of science through theater, a truly interdisciplinary endeavor. So where does the stillness come in? We activists have a lot to do right now and a lot to worry about. In his April article for The Atlantic, Alan writes about finding stillness within the frenzy, and specifically, how the horror of the pandemic may actually help us foster this stillness. For those of us lucky enough to not be on the front lines right now, this period of enforced isolation brings with it the chance for mental and emotional replenishment, a burgeoning creativity, and what he calls the restoration of our inner selves. It's a theme he also explores in his most recent nonfiction book, the temptingly titled In Praise of Wasting Time, which is wonderful, where he talks about what the wired world is doing to our minds and souls, and how and why we should recapture our sense of play and, yes, stillness. Alan is fresh off an interview with Oprah, proud and excited to have him joining us tonight. Without further ado, Alan Lightman.
Thank you, Juliet. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I thank my friends. I recognize many of them here. And I'm honored to be part of the Sister District community. I first found out about Sister District in mid-March, and this is something you probably don't know, but my brethren, my son-in-law, who's very interested in politics, sent me 100 or 200 postcards to send out to voters in Florida, and they were from Sister District. And the instructions were that my wife, Gina, and I should address these postcards personally, and we should write a personal note to each voter about why voting was important to us. And I took some time to think about this, why voting is important to me. And I think what I wrote in my 100 or so postcards, and this was handwritten, which is part of the intimacy of the organization. I wrote that voting was important to me as a protection of our democracy. And I think I wrote one or two more sentences about that. And I realized that in order to write that, I not only had to think about the wording, but I had to think about what was important to me, what my values are. and that required some quiet. It required a place of stillness. And there's kind of a paradox there that I know all of us attending this moment on this Zoom call are activists, but it's a paradox that an activist can also be seeking a place of stillness. It's sort of the interior world versus the outer world, and somehow they're both important. And I would argue that in the last couple of centuries that the modern world, and especially the pace of the modern world, has made it harder and harder to find quiet places of reflection about our values and who we are and what's important to us and where we're going. I think that this started probably back with the Industrial Revolution, but the pace of life has always been regulated by the speed of communication and commerce. And as you all know, the speed of communication has increased enormously. I think if you, the telegraph could send out, which was in the 1830s or 1840s, could send out three bits per second. That was the speed of communication then. In 1985, when the internet began, you could send out about 1,000 bits per second. And now the speed of communication via the internet is 1 billion bits per second. So that incredible speed of communication is largely responsible for the fact that our lives have gotten faster and faster and faster, more and more frantic. I mean, even the walking speed has increased. There was a study by the British Council about 20 years ago that studied 35 cities in the world and found that from 2005 to 2015, that the walking speed had increased by 10%. We're just living faster and faster and faster. And one of the tragedies associated with this is that we have less time to think about who we are, what's important to us, where we're going. We've divided up our day into, we've cut it down into smaller and smaller increments of efficiency until now, if you've got 10 minutes extra, you'll do something on your iPhone. We just don't waste a minute anymore. And that means that we don't have time to think about who we are and what's important to us and what our values are. And I think that as activists, Socrates said, know yourself. I think as activists that we first need, the first action is within ourselves to think about what's important to us. And so we need to find stillness in our lives in order to be activists, I think, in order to be whole human beings. So this danger, this threat, this loss of stillness, sometimes I ask myself, what have I lost? And of course, I'm guilty of this too. I have an iPhone myself. I think that Americans send out 6 billion text messages a day. That's 20 text messages for every man, woman, and child. So what have we lost when we're living this frantic pace of life? What have we lost? Well, one thing we've lost, I think, is our creativity. I mean, we haven't lost it, but we've damaged our creativity. Psychologists and social scientists have known for decades, or maybe a century or two, that that creativity depends upon what's called divergent thinking, being able to let the mind wander. I think we've also threatened the needed replenishment of the mind. The mind needs quiet, it needs stillness. The Buddhists have known this for more than 1,000 years, and Hindus before that. But I think that we've lost something even more important than that, and Juliet mentioned it, and this is something I talked about in my article in the Atlantic. I think that we've threatened our inner lives, and our inner lives are our inner selves, our inner selves. Our inner self is the part of us that dreams, that imagines. I'm sure Lala had a dream when she started Sister District Project. Our inner self is where we think about who we are and what we want to be and what's important. And that's the most precious thing that we have. Our inner self requires stillness. It requires quiet. You have to be able to listen to that quiet whispering voice. And again, I think it's sort of paradoxical that in order to act in the outer world, that we need first to be able to act in the inner world. And for that, we need moments of quiet reflection and stillness. So I will stop there and be happy to take questions. I may not be able to answer them all, but I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, but I'll be happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you very much, Alan. I have to say, stillness feels so aspirational right now, especially with the pace of just the news and messages coming from various so-called leaders through every medium, Twitter, and it feels like a fire hydrant of information. And sometimes, I don't know, personally, I find it in activism, trying to find the balance between staying informed and taking in information that I have to have, but also trying to filter some out so that I can preserve a little bit of space. It's very difficult. Let me go to some questions. Okay, a question from Caroline. When your Atlantic article came out in early April, most of us were in the early phases of various forms of quarantine. In just a couple months, we are now seeing protests for racial and social justice. Can you comment on the collective thought process that likely triggered what we're seeing now? Protests, statues being toppled, people doubling down on their activism.
Well, I can speculate on that. First of all, I think that the huge reaction to the George Floyd death was something that had been building over many years of seeing other instances of racism. So I think that it was like a dry forest that's waiting for a match. But I think that the COVID situation did play a role in the strong reaction. First of all, I think that many of us have been sequestered in our homes and have had the luxury of thinking more about what's important to us. So that's one of the few benefits of the COVID situation, the terrible situation. But I also think that psychologically, we've been very stirred up by the COVID situation, and this unprecedented illness that's sweeping the country. I mean, most of us were born after the 1918 epidemic. And I think that we've gotten tremendously sensitive and tuned in to things that we weren't in a way before. The entire world has been turned upside down, of course. So I think that every event has a different significance than it did before this unprecedented time that we're in. So I think for all of those reasons that that we saw a coupling between, of course, no one knows what the causal connections are, but I think that the COVID phenomena definitely played into the strength of the reaction with the George Floyd murder.
Thank you. Speaking of protests, could you talk a little bit about anger? This is a question from Barbara. For those of us constructively involved in activism, is it acceptable to avoid dwelling on things in the world that anger us? Or is experiencing the anger part of our responsibility as human beings?
That's a great question. This is far out of my area of expertise. But I think that there's constructive anger and destructive anger. And I think constructive anger is when the anger turns into action, positive action. Because we all know what destructive anger is. But I think that every, I mean, the Buddhists would say that every emotion, if it's authentic, is valuable and is a learning experience. We learn about ourselves. So I certainly would not try to put the anger aside or repress it. I would try to turn it into something positive. And Lala mentioned that in the 2016 election that among the many emotions that she experienced was one of them was anger. And she managed to turn that anger into a constructive activity. So to me, that's one of the best uses of anger.
Mm-hmm. How do you, just piggybacking on that, how do you help someone or communicate with someone who maybe is stuck in destructive anger? Is there a way to, I don't know, maybe that's too big a question, help them turn that around?
I think it would take a psychologist to give a good answer to that, and I'm not going to pretend to be a psychologist, but it's a great question. I just don't have the expertise to answer it.
Got it. This is a question from me. What is a way we can help our children find stillness in this time that is so unsettled and so loud?
Well, I have a friend who I think is attending this this Zoom call, Lucille Burt, who was a school teacher in Arlington, Massachusetts for a number of years. And I think she won awards as a star teacher. And one of the things that she instituted in her classroom was at the beginning of each class, she would ring a bell and the students would have to be quiet for 3 or 4 minutes. And she found that really centered the students. I think they did better work and it just quieted everybody down. So one of the things that I've advocated building on Lucille's invention is that every school, I'm speaking below the college level now, should have 10 minutes of silence each day in the school at some point of the day, and just have the children get used to having some quiet time. You don't give them any directions of what to do during that 10 minutes, except that they can't talk. I think at home that we overschedule our children with piano lessons, music lessons, all kinds of after-school activities. I think we overschedule them. And I think that children, and that's part of the problem that we're talking about. That's part of this frantic pace of the wired world. And I think that we should give our children unscheduled time at home just to play. And we don't do enough of that. Mm-hmm. So those are some ways that we can help our children. I think that at dinner time at home, that we should unplug all of the devices, unplug the phones, unplug the computers, and just have dinner conversation. Mm-hmm. What did you do today? Who did you meet? What new thing did you learn today? With no interruptions by beeps and buzzes and bells.
Right. And that you also talk in some of your writing about kind of the importance of allowing boredom. That kind of the wired world has created this expectation of constant stimulation, and maybe our kids could use a little more boredom.
Well, boredom has so many negative connotations. Of course, wasting time has negative connotations too. But what I mean by wasting time is spending time where you're not trying to accomplish anything. That's not goal oriented. And it's during those periods of time that I think that your mind is most creative. I know that the composer, the musical composer, Gustav Mahler, used to take 3-hour walks after lunch. And during those walks, some of his best musical ideas used to come to him. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
Let me ask Alan a personal question from Jeremy. What events in your life provided the greatest motivation for an activist role?
Well, that's a great question. My father's father was very involved with social projects, and even though I was a pretty young child when he passed away, I did know about them and was inspired by them. My father himself played a role in desegregating the South. He was a movie theater owner, and he was one of the first movie theater owners in the South to desegregate his theaters. So that made a big impression on me. I think that my work in Southeast Asia, that I met a very inspiring woman, and she inspired me to begin helping women in Southeast Asia. But I think politically that I was not very active until Donald Trump got elected. And I experienced all of the emotions that Lala described at the beginning. And that's when my life as a political activist began.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Um, Here's a question from Joni. How do we find equanimity when talking with friends who dismiss the immorality, racism, and egotism of Voldemort, he who shall not be named, and his enablers, because they affirm equally detestable actions such as packing courts and a, quote, good economy? How do we communicate?
How do we communicate with them? Well, this is a very, very good question, because something like 35% of the public supports Trump, and I assume share similar views. I mean, there's no monolithic Trump supporter. Some of them support him because they're business people and think he's good for business, but there are many of that 35% that share his racist and white supremacist views. I've lost a lot of friends over this. I'm not saying a lot, but a few friends. But we can't dismiss those people because they're Americans too. And they're part of our country. And so somehow or another, we have to figure out ways of talking to them. And I don't have the secret potion for that. I know that I have a friend who's a political activist in Texas, and he tries to get together people who are both support and oppose Trump. And I'm using Trump now as a placeholder for all of these opposing views, just the sort of the lightning rod for all of this. This organization tries to get supporters and opponents of these views together talking, looking for things in common. But I think this is a very, very important issue that's going to be with us long after the Trump era is over, that we've still got this large, the country's divided. And of course, that was building for a long time before Trump got elected. And somehow we have to figure out what caused those divisions. I don't know what the secret for that is, but I think that the dialogue is important, and we can't just dismiss that segment of the population. We have to. I mean, that's the terrible mistake that Hillary Clinton made. When she said that I can't remember the word the
deplorables.
Deplorables. Yeah. I mean, that was a huge mistake. So we can't dismiss them. We have to figure out a way to talk to them.
Mm-hmm. That actually reminds me of, we had a town hall with Ricky Junquera, who's here, a couple weeks ago. And I was so impressed with, there was a question about basically how do you achieve this in Florida, where there's very red voters and very blue voters. And Ricky, forgive me if I misparaphrase, but it was you said something along the lines of, you meet people where they are and you try to address them in ways that they can hear. So, Ricky said he doesn't go he's an environmental activist, but he doesn't go barnstorming in with his activism. He goes in with maybe a financial view of why environmentalism might be financially feasible. So it takes a real flexibility that we're all trying to have, I think.
Good advice.
And I guess great minds think alike, Juliet, because I had put that in the chat just as you were mentioning my name.
Oh.
So it was kind of funny that you said that. Sorry, someone unmuted me. But I will say, Alan, you're 100% right. And Juliet, I would say I'm honored to be paraphrased, to get to the point in my life and my career to be paraphrased. I went to great schools in the New England area. And so that was just a little bit of an awe moment for myself. But in the Cuban American community, Alan, I know that many people in this Zoom know that my community is very popular in the Republican circles. You know, two Cuban American men ran for president on the Republican ticket in 2016, and I say now I would have, you know, loved either of them over what we got. But that's, you know, hindsight is 2020, right? But I will say that, you know, a lot of people called for deleting your account, your social media accounts, if you were a Trump supporter after 2016. And my response to people, one-liner was, you know, that would mean that half of my family and I would not be talking anymore. And so, you know, yes, you were right. Economic reasons are very important to some people, especially proud Cuban Americans who came to this country and built their own businesses. And so you have to respect and understand where they're coming from in that regard. But also now everyone is hurting. And so the same social programs that they would come at me or Franccesca and say that we're socialists, right? Nobody is making those arguments these days, given the state of affairs and given so many people's reliance on those same social programs that the Republicans have you know, held against us for so long. So I just give that as an example.
Right. Yep. A question from our other candidate who's here, Franccesca, who asks Alan, what's a good amount of time for us to practice stillness in the day? Probably any, I'm guessing, but.
I'll just mention that I saw Franccesca's town hall or whatever it was a few days ago, and she was wonderful. So
thank you.
To be on the same Zoom with her. Well, of course, there's no formula for this.
Yeah.
But I think it's like somebody who's trying to cure an addiction. You know, you cut back a little of your whatever it is, and then you cut back a little bit more, and you see how you do. I think that we could start with 30 minutes a day unplugging, and that means turning off your iPhone, not having it with you. I mentioned earlier turning everything off during the dinner hour. I know every family is different. In some families, everybody eats together at the same time. Other families are not able to do that because of jobs and other responsibilities. But the dinner hour is another time, or dinner half hour, or dinner 20 minutes, if that's all you've got, to unplug. But I think 20 or 30 minutes a day of quiet time where you're taking a walk or you're sitting quietly in a chair. I mean, most of us can't sit for 10 minutes in a chair without external stimulation. There've even been studies of this, of college students who can't sit for 10 minutes in a chair without stimulation, external stimulation. So I would say start off small, 20 minutes, and just see what it does to you. See how it affects your mind.
I think that's great advice. And I can say, you know, it's a perfect topic and I was so excited for tonight. So thank you for this. As candidates too, we care so much and so deeply, and we're all out there and we see the need and the despair and the heartache that people are going through, especially right now. So sometimes it's good to have and force yourself to have that moment, because, you know, you take it in, you care and you want to help. And so, yeah, for the last few weeks, I was like, I need to find time to actually have a moment of stillness. So I love that you said that. It was like you were speaking to me, because we're there trying to help so many folks. We do take it to heart. And so, yeah, I'm so excited. And yes, we're going to be practicing that. And also with the kids, you know, now we're home. And sometimes, you know, the TV is there, the tablet is there. So I like that you said we don't let them be bored anymore. And And it's so funny because my kids are like, we love it when we have no schedule. And they're excited. And that's where you see their creativity. You know, they were playing airport and rearranging my dining room table chairs. And they started playing Zoom and they drew on a dry erase board, their little Zoom screen, which was hilarious. And this is where we start seeing the kids are, in fact, a bit more happy when they're not into so much structure and timeline. So this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time and really talking to us about something that we also need, because there's so much emotion going on right now, and this is perfect. So thank you to everyone here. This is an amazing conversation.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. And on that note, there are a few other questions, but I don't want to run over. And so maybe I could forward them to you, Alan, after this, and, we could figure out a way to communicate them.
Good, I'll do that.
Yes, this has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, I count this conversation as a moment of stillness, sort of just thinking about it is helpful. We really can't thank you enough for speaking to us. I think anybody who is engaged in the world in any form needs to be thinking about this right now. And I am going to give the last word to Patrick, one of our fearless leaders at Sister District Mass Rhode Island, who is going to call you to more action after you've been still. Patrick.
Hi, everybody. And I just have to say, again, thank you to Alan and to Ricky and Franccesca and Lala and the organizing team, everybody who's here tonight and who donated and who showed up and took part in this conversation with Alan. Just thank you so much. It means so much to us. And so as you begin to find your stillness and your strength within, then what do you do with it? Well, the number one thing you can do with it right now is you can help us call voters in Ricky and Franccesca's districts. We have phone banks going on twice weekly on Sundays at 4 p.m. and also on Thursday nights at 6:30 p.m. And we just have a great time. We have a great sort of group of volunteers doing this that you can join us with. And we're doing things like we're increasing Ricky's and Franccesca's name recognition in their districts because they're first-time candidates. Not everybody knows who they are. We're helping with that. We're identifying supporters and volunteers for them. We're providing help with vote by mail, and we're acting as ambassadors for their campaigns and just listening to people and engaging them like human beings, which is really important right now. And if you haven't phone banked before, we provide one-on-one support to get you set up. We have lots of team spirit. And I know for me, one of my sources of inner strength and stillness comes from the community that we have here with Sister District Mass Rhode Island. And it's a fantastic group of team leaders and volunteers. And I'm just really grateful. And I hope that you all will join us. So at phone banking, the other thing you can do is we have other fundraiser events coming up too. We have an awesome sounding, I just can't wait for it, a night of neo soul music on August 9th. Another Zoom call, a live concert, which we've been doing. It'll be the third in our series. So check out I think the link is in the chat now. And so check that out. Check out our events listing and sign up for these events, and you can put your stillness and your activism to use with us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Ricky, Franccesca, Lala, Alan, and the whole gang. This was wonderful. So hope to see you next time.